Today we are making the Amish Star quilt block. So this quilt block looks fantastic with just two colors. So this one I've chosen just red and white. I think it's just kind of a classic combination. In this tutorial we're going to learn several different techniques of quilting. So we're going to be making half square triangles. We're going to be making flying geese. In our assembly we'll be using the 4-patch assembly as well as the 9-patch assembly. So let's just get started here. So for this tutorial we are making a 9-inch block. I have here shown a 6-inch and the 12-inch. I do have a printable pattern that you can purchase, that you can get those sizes, as well as some larger 15 and 8-inch sizes. So we are making the 9-inch block for this tutorial. So you will need 2 squares of fabric that are 5 inches, a red and a white. Then you will need a red square that is 4.5 inches. You'll need 4 white squares that are 2 5/8 inches. You'll need 8 red squares. These ones are 2 inches. You'll need a white square that is 3.5 inches. And then you will need 4 rectangle squares that are white. These are 2 by 3.5. So let's just get started here. We're going to do our half square triangles. So I'm just going to move all aside except for our 2 largest squares here. So I'm just going to grab my little scrap paper here. I just like to use this so that I don't draw on my backdrop here. We're going to take a ruler. From corner to corner I'm going to place the 1/4 inch line of the ruler from corner to corner in the center, and then I'll just draw along the side. This is going to give us a line that is 1/4 inch from the center, and we can just sew directly on this line. So we'll just flip the fabric and do the other side. We're also going to draw lines in the opposite direction. So just again, take the 1/4 inch marking on the ruler, place it from corner to corner, and then draw along the edge. Okay. So there we have our square. So we're just going to take these, place them right sides together. So we can take it over to the sewing machine. We will just stitch along all of these lines that we drew. Okay, so we have our lines sewn. We're just going to take a ruler here, and we're going to cut our square into 8 triangles. So I'm just lining up my ruler. I'm lining up these center lines that right here, and then I'm just lining up the edge along one of the lines just to make sure that it's straight when I cut it. And I'll just slice it in half vertically and then horizontally as well. And then I will also slice between the stitching lines. Okay, so now we have 8 half square triangles here. Can't even open it. Just like that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim up the squares. So we're going to get them exactly the right size. So these need to be, let me look, make sure I get it right. These need to be 2-inch squares. So on the ruler here, you can see these different lines, maybe, if it will focus. I'm not sure if it's focusing or not. So this side we have 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. On this side, there's the whole marking. So there's a 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch. So for this one, we need them to be 2 inches square. So I'm going to take the 2-inch line, line it up with the seam, and then just simply trim around the outside. And then we will have perfect 2-inch half square triangles. So we'll just do that with all of our squares. Okay, next we will just press open our half square triangles. So I'm just going to place the red side up. I want to press towards the red. So if I place the red side up, lift it up, and press, then the seam will be pressed towards the red fabric. So we'll just press all of them. Okay, and then the last step for our half square triangles is to just trim the tails off. So I just take a pair of scissors and trim those tails. Just like that. Okay, so our next step here is to make the flying geese. So next we will just grab our next largest square. This one is the one that is 4.5. And then our 4 white squares. We're going to take our white squares and we're just going to mark 2 lines from corner to corner on the diagonal to give us our sewing lines. So this is the same thing as we did with the half square triangles, except we're just going to do one direction. So just like that, just 2 lines from corner to corner, 1/4 of an inch away from the center. So again, just to make it clear, I'm lining up the 1/4 of an inch line from the ruler from corner to corner on the square, and then I draw a line on the outside of the ruler, on the edge of the ruler. And that gives us a line that is 1/4 of an inch away from the center. So I know a lot of people do it different ways. I just really like to know the line I'm sewing on. I find that it's easier for me. So you can use other methods if you'd like as well, but that's how I do it. Okay, so we have our 4-inch square. This is 4.5, and we have our 4 squares. These are 2 5/8. We're going to take 2 of them, and we're going to place them on our square in one corner. We'll place another one in the opposite corner, and we want to make sure that the lines run so it's one continuous line. We'll take this over to the sewing machine and stitch on both of those lines. Okay, so we have our seams sewn. I'm just going to take our cutting mat here, and we will just cut between the two. This ruler is barely long enough to do this. To cut between the 2 seams. Just slice it right in half like this. Next we'll just take our pressing mat and we're going to press open these pieces. So you're going to have these odd looking things. They kind of look like little hearts when they're pressed open. And that's what it's supposed to be. It looks a little odd, but that is what you want. Okay, so then we will take our remaining 2 squares here and we're going to place them on the piece like this so that the line is vertical from this seam that we just sewed. Okay, so we'll just take both of these to the sewing machine and stitch along both of the lines. One thing I like to do is to chain stitch, which means I'll just continue on with the next piece right after that one. It just makes things easier and quicker sometimes. Okay, so we have our pieces sewn, and we will just take our ruler once again. We'll place it between the stitching and slice it right in half. So just like that. Repeat with the other square. I guess it's not a square, it's an odd shape, but okay. Next we'll just grab our ironing mat and we will press these open. So just lift up that corner and press open, just like that. Now we are going to trim these up here in a minute, so they will not have these weird tails all over, and we'll get them the perfect size. I find flying geese are hard to make accurately without making them just a little bigger and then trimming up. So instead of trying to be perfect, I trim to perfection and I make them however they come out. So there's a few ways to do this. So a lot of times there's a ruler. I use this ruler a lot. I have a couple different sizes, but the size that I need for this pattern I don't have a ruler for. So I'm going to show you how to do it if you don't have a flying geese ruler. So this flying geese needs to be trimmed to 2 inches by 3.5 inches. So 2 inches this way, 3.5 inches this way. So the first step is I take my ruler and I use the 1/4 inch marking. I line it up with the point of the flying geese. So I line up that 1/4 inch line with the point, and I make sure that it's parallel, and then I'll just trim off that top piece right there. Then I have a square edge to work with. So I'm going to flip it the opposite direction. This needs to be 2 inches. Just double checking my notes. Yes, 2 inches. So I line up the 2 inch marking of the ruler with the edge that we just straightened up, and then I'll trim the bottom. Okay, so now it's the correct direction that way. The next step, this one's a little trickier. You have to go from the center and cut. So anyway, we need it to be 3.5 inches. Half of 3.5 is 1 3/4. Is that right? I think so. 3 would be 1.5, and a half would be 1/4. So 1 3/4. So I'm going to take the 1 3/4 line on my ruler and line it up with the point, because that's going to be the center. And then I'm just going to slide it up just so that I can cut along the whole edge. And I can check that this is on the 2 line so that it's straight this way. The center is 1 3/4, and that's lined up with the point. And I will trim that side. Then I'll flip it around, and this time we can just go by the total length. So I line up this edge with 3.5, and I'm just going to move it a little bit so I have room on the edge here. Make it easier to cut. So that is how I trim up flying geese when I don't have a ruler for the specific size that I need. Okay, so we have our half square triangles finished. We have our flying geese finished. So it's time to start assembling some things here. So I'm going to start with our flying geese. I'll take each flying geese piece and a rectangle. I'll take them, place them right sides together, and I will stitch along one side. Now the side you want to stitch on is the big side, not the point, but the long red side. So we're going to take these over to the sewing machine, and we will just stitch there. Got them all sewn together, so now we will just press them open, and I like to press towards the white fabric. So just place that on top, lift, and press open. Okay, so we will set these aside for a moment, and next we are going to be making our 4 patch units. So for our flying geese, we just made this unit right here. Next we're going to be making this 4 patch unit right here. So you'll just take, for each 4 patch, you'll take 2 squares and 2 half square triangles. Now you're just going to want to make sure that that the squares are opposite of each other and that the white points are facing inward. Okay, so we'll just take these to the sewing machine. I will take this piece, press, sew along this side, just with right sides together, sew along this side, just like that. So I'm going to take these all over to the sewing machine and work on these 4 patches. So I don't have a ton of room here on my sewing machine, but I do just kind of like to lay out the pieces on here, and then I can just grab them in the order that they need to go in. So I'm just going to kind of line up my at least a couple of my 4 patches here, just so that they're all lined up ready to go. And these are small enough I can fit some over here. Hopefully I won't knock those off when I'm sewing. So this is the one I'm starting with right here. So I'm just going to grab the 2 pieces, place them right sides together and stitch. Then I'll grab the next one and stitch and just keep going in a continuous line. Okay, so we have all our squares sewn together for the first portion of our 4 patch. So I'm just going to press them all open towards the red side. Now the reason I'm doing this and the reason I'm particular about the way I press is because I love to nest the seams, and that just means that the seams interlock. They go in opposite directions of each other. For this block, there are a few that I will have to adjust as I'm stitching the block together, just because of the way things line up. But if I do it this way, the majority of the seams will nest automatically and I won't have to fiddle with them. When we get to the assembly, I will explain a little bit more about that. Oops. Okay, so we have our pieces here. I'm just going to take 2 and I'm going to place them so that they are just lined up in the orientation with the full squares on the sides opposite of each other, and then the half square triangles opposite of each other with the white points facing inward towards each other. And I will just take them, place them right sides together, and this is where I'm going to nest the seams. So you can see that this seam is pressed this way, this seam is pressed that way, so then they will interlock and then they will match up nicely as we are stitching them together. So I'll just take these to the sewing machine and stitch them all together. Okay, so we have our 4 patch units sewn together. Next we're going to press them open. So with a 4 patch, I like to just fiddle with the middle, and then one seam will press one direction, another seam will press the other way, and then it lays nice and flat. So again, this is from the back side. I just fiddle with the middle, and then you can tell, especially with this contrast of fabric with the white and the red, is going to make this little 4 patch in the center. You'll just fiddle with that, kind of open up those seams in the center so that they lay nice and flat like that. Now some of these are going to be moved as we assemble the block, but it's hard to know. It's too much for my brain to figure out which ones might need to go a different direction until I assemble it. So I just press them as I normally would. And then when we get to it, if the seams aren't nesting, then I'll flip them just manually with my fingers and then press the block flat after. But okay, so we have our pieces. We have everything now that we need to assemble our block. So if you'll take a look at the main block here, if you look at the pieces that we have now, we can assemble it as a 9 patch. So we have created these little 4 patches for the corners. We've created these with the flying geese, these squares for the edges, and then we'll just have a center square that's solid. So I just like to start with that center square and place all my flying geese around it with the points facing inward. Just like that. And then we will take our remaining pieces, and we want the solid square to be pointing towards the middle. So this is wrong. This is how we want it. And on the first one that I made, I got them all right, but somehow one of them was switched. And so you'll be able to notice, because you'll have like this angle on the side. That could be a cool block if you turned them all that way. It would just give it a completely different look. That might be kind of cool too. But you want all of the squares pointing towards the middle. Okay, so then we will just take these and we'll just sew it like a 9 patch. So we'll just take the top 3 pieces, sew them together, the middle row will sew together, and the bottom row will sew together. Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of how I do chain piecing with a block set up. So this is kind of an awkward camera angle, but I've just brought the pieces over here on my cutting mat. I'm just going to take the top 2 pieces, place them right sides together. This is where I'm going to nest some seams here. So I'm going to take these and press with my fingers, make sure we have opposite seams there. And I'll just sew this first piece like this. Now normally, the way I do my tutorials a lot of times is I just show that I make this whole row together. But if I did that, then I would have to clip and start again, which is what I do a lot. But if I want to chain stitch, then I'm just going to take the next 2 pieces here. Wow, this is just really awkward to catch on camera. I'm going to take my next 2 pieces, so I'll just take these right sides together and stitch this one. Then I will take the bottom 2, place them right sides together, and I will stitch those. Now this is one where just the nature of the block, the seams are both facing towards the same direction. So I'm going to take this one, the 4 patch on the back, and I'm going to flip it this way. So this seam on the back will be all the same way and different than how I originally pressed it, but that's okay. I would rather have this seam nest because that makes my points better. I find I'm a little more accurate if I can nest the seams. Okay, so now that I've got these 3 rows done, or these 3 different blocks sewn together, I'll trim them up, and then I'm going to take them back over to my board, and I will just open them up and make sure that they are in the correct orientation. And then I will start sewing the other edges here. So I'm going to take this one, place it right sides together, and we'll check the seams. Now there's going to be 2 that are not right, so these are the same direction again. So I'm just going to flip this one so it is opposite so I can nest that seam, and I just use my fingers and feel and make sure that it's in there right. Then we'll sew that. Then I'll just come back to my mat and I will grab the next row and place them right sides together. Now something I should have done on the first time that I didn't, I'm going to show you how to make sure your points line up good with your flying geese, not sew over the point. So I'm going to just sew along here. I'm going to watch where my seam is and where the point is on the half square triangle and try to make sure that I'm just past that point. So let me see if I can zoom. Okay, so I just turned off the camera trying to zoom in. But here is, hopefully you can see this, it will line up okay. But so I'm just taking watching my needle, and then just as I come, I'm checking and making sure that I'm on this side of that point. And my bottom's here is not quite straight, so I'm going to straighten that up, but I'm just going to go just on that side of the point. And then when I open it up, it hopefully will not be like this, because see, I did the opposite one. It was upside down, so I wasn't watching. So the tip got cut off just a little bit. But then we'll just take our last piece, and this one nests nicely, so we'll... Not sure how well you could tell when I was sewing how focused the camera was or whatever, but what I was trying to do was make sure that the point of the flying geese just matched up just right to the edge. Now this one I sewed, I should have flipped it so that this side was up, but I sewed it like this, so I couldn't really see where I was sewing. So if you can see on the back, I sewed just over that point just a little bit, and so you can see when I open it up that that point is just cut off just a little bit. Now, I'm not going to worry about it. I think it's close enough. But that is how you make sure that your points do come out more like this one, where it's just right up to the edge. That is because I sewed when I got to this part right here. I just watched as I was going, and I sewed just on that side of the point so that I could, when I opened it up, it was just perfect. So that's kind of what I was trying to explain over at the sewing machine. I don't often actually film when I'm sewing, because then I gotta have two cameras, and then when I add the video to the computer, then I've got two different SD cards and everything, and it's just kind of a pain, so I don't do it that way. But I do think that sometimes you can explain stuff, or you can show things that as you're sewing. What I'm doing right now is I am pressing the seams, and I'm doing them in opposite directions. So the top and bottom, I did that one wrong. The top and bottom I want to press outward, and I was too busy talking and I pressed this one inward. The middle one I'm pressing inward. This is just, again, to nest the seams. Okay, so one more thing, just with the nesting of the seams, you can see that this first one right here, they're both facing the same direction. So that's just the nature of these 4 patches. Some of them are going to line up, and some of them I'm going to have to flip. So this one I'm going to flip, and I'm just going to go and make sure each time I have a seam here that they're nesting and lining up perfectly as I stitch. Okay, so there we have our block. I'm just going to take it real quick, and we will press the seams that we just sewed flat. I like to press them towards the middle, but it really doesn't matter at this point which way they go. So that is how you make the Amish Star quilt block. So like I said, this one is a 9-inch. If you'd like to make it in the 12-inch size, the 6-inch size, or make bigger blocks like 15 or 8-inch sizes, go ahead and grab my printable pattern that you can get those, and enjoy.